Look, I'm gonna be real with you about something that happened 25 years ago. Because honestly, I'm still trying to figure out why everyone acts like I'm the villain here. My name's Celeste. I'm 54 now, and back then I was just a 29-year-old woman, drowning in a life that felt like it was suffocating me slowly. You know those marriages where you feel like you're just existing? That was me and Garrett. We had 5 kids, five, ranging from 3 to 11, and I swear some days I felt more like a live-in babysitter than an actual person with wants and needs. Garrett worked all the time, and I mean all the time. He'd leave before the kids woke up and come home after dinner, sit in his recliner with a beer, and basically grunt responses to anything I said between us. I started feeling like I was married to a ghost who occasionally helped pay bills. The romance died somewhere between kid number 3 and 4, but nobody talks about that part, do they? They just expect you to be grateful for a roof over your head and ignore the fact that your husband treats you like furniture. I managed everything. Doctor appointments, school events, grocery shopping, cleaning, cooking, homework help, everything. And what did I get for it? A husband who acted like I should be thrilled he showed up to parent-teacher conferences twice a year. The man couldn't even remember when my birthday was half the time, but somehow I was supposed to be this perfect little housewife who never complained. Don't get me wrong. I loved my kids, but being their mom 24/7 while feeling completely invisible to my husband was eating me alive. I'd look in the mirror and think, is this it? Is this what the rest of my life looks like? Garrett never complimented me anymore, never surprised me, never even really looked at me unless he needed something. I felt like I was disappearing bit by bit every single day. That's when I started working part-time, just to get out of the house and remember what it felt like to be around adults who actually acknowledged my existence. And that's where I met Damon. He was this guy who worked nearby, and from day one, he actually saw me, like really saw me. He'd ask how my day was and wait for the real answer, not just nod and walk away like Bart did. He noticed when I changed my hair, remembered. Things I told him made me laugh until my stomach hurt. For the first time in years, I felt like a woman instead of just a mom and wife. Damon would text me during the day asking how I was doing, and I'd find myself smiling at my phone like a teenager. It was innocent at first, just someone who made me feel human again. But honestly, after years of being treated like I was invisible, having someone pay attention to me felt like oxygen after drowning. I started looking forward to work more than going home. At work, I was Celeste, funny, smart, interesting Celeste. At home, I was just the person who made sure everyone else's needs were met, while mine didn't matter to anyone. The contrast was getting harder and harder to ignore. And every day, Garrett's indifference felt like another nail in the coffin of whatever we used to have together. The thing about emotional affairs is they start so gradually. You don't even realize you're having one until you're already in too deep. With Damon, it began as just friendly conversations during break time, but soon we were texting throughout the day and finding excuses to spend time together after work. He made me feel alive in a way I'd forgotten was possible. And honestly, after years of Garrett treating me like background noise, it felt incredible to have someone hang on my every word. I started lying to Garrett about where I was going, telling him I was grocery shopping or running errands, when really I was meeting Damon for coffee or just driving around talking for hours. The crazy part is how easy it was to lie because Garrett barely paid attention anyway. I could have told him I was flying to Mars, and he probably would have just nodded and asked what was for dinner. His complete disinterest in my life made the deception almost effortless. When Garrett did occasionally ask questions about my day or why I seemed different, I'd flip it back on him. Oh, now you care about my day, where was this interest for the past 10 years? I got really good at making him feel guilty for even questioning me. Like, how dare he suddenly want to know my whereabouts when he'd spent years acting like I didn't exist? The audacity was unreal. Damon and I would meet at this little diner outside town where nobody knew us, and for those few hours, I felt like myself again. He'd listen to me talk about my dreams, my frustrations, everything Garrett had no patience for. When I told Damon about feeling trapped and unappreciated, he'd get this look in his eyes like he wanted to rescue me from my miserable life. It was intoxicating, having someone care that much about my happiness. The physical stuff started small. A hand on my shoulder, sitting closer than necessary, those lingering hugs goodbye that lasted just a second too long. But when it finally happened, when we finally crossed that line, it felt like coming alive after being dead for years. I know how that sounds. But you have to understand, I hadn't felt desired or wanted in so long that being with someone who actually wanted me felt like a revelation. I became a master at covering my tracks. I'd shower the second I got home, delete text messages, and create elaborate stories about where I'd been. The kids became my perfect alibis. I had to take Sarah to soccer practice, or Tommy needed help with his project, and Garrett never questioned it because he was barely involved anyway. His lack of engagement with family life actually made my double life easier to maintain. The guilt people expect you to feel, it just wasn't there. How could I feel guilty for finally being happy when my husband had checked out of our marriage years ago? In my mind, Garrett had abandoned me emotionally long before I found someone who actually valued me. If he'd been the husband I needed, none of this would have happened, but instead of looking at his own failures, he'd rather play the victim when I found happiness somewhere else. When Garrett started getting suspicious about my changed mood and asking more questions, I gaslight him like a pro. You're being paranoid, I'd say, or maybe if you paid this much attention to me normally, I wouldn't seem different. I made him feel crazy for noticing that his wife was acting strange. And honestly, part of me enjoyed watching him scramble to figure out what was wrong while being too clueless to actually guess the truth. Everything changed when Garrett went through my phone while I was in the shower. I came out to find him sitting on the bed holding it, and the look on his face told me everything I needed to know. Instead of feeling caught or ashamed, my first emotion was pure rage. How dare he violate my privacy like that? The sheer audacity of going through my personal messages without permission made me angrier than anything else in that moment. What the hell do you think you're doing? I demanded, snatching the phone from his hands like he was the one in the wrong here. He just stared at me with this expression I'd never seen before. Like he was looking at a complete stranger. Well, maybe. He was finally paying attention for once in his life. But it was too little too late at that point. He started reading off text messages between me and Damon, his voice getting shakier with each one. When he got to the really intimate ones, I actually felt annoyed that he was making such a big deal out of it. You want to know why this happened? I shot back, because you stopped being a husband years ago. You think you can ignore me for a decade, and then act shocked when someone else gives me what you won't. The tears started then, not because I felt guilty, but because I was frustrated that my perfect situation was falling apart. I needed Garrett to understand that this was his fault, that his neglect had driven me to find love elsewhere. I never meant for this to happen. I sobbed, which was technically true. I hadn't planned to fall for Damon. It just happened naturally when I was starved for affection and attention. Garrett kept asking stupid questions like, how long has this been going on and do you love him? As if the timeline mattered more than the fact that he'd failed as a husband. I tried to explain that Damon made me feel valued and appreciated, things Garrett had stopped doing years ago, but he couldn't see past his own hurt feelings to understand that I was the real victim here. The manipulation came easily. I promised to end things with Damon, swore it was just an emotional mistake, and begged Garrett for another chance. But even as the words left my mouth, I was already planning how to contact Damon safely. Garrett's willingness to forgive me felt more like weakness than love, and honestly, it made me lose even more respect for him. A real man would have fought harder for his wife, instead of just rolling over and accepting my promises. I started going to couples therapy with Garrett, but mostly I used those sessions to build my case against him. I'd bring up years of feeling neglected and unappreciated, painting myself as a woman who'd been pushed to the breaking point by an emotionally absent husband. The therapist ate it up, nodding sympathetically as I described feeling invisible in my own marriage. Garrett would try to defend himself, but I'd already framed the narrative. He was the distant workaholic husband, and I was the lonely wife. Driven to desperation, behind the scenes, I was still texting Damon and meeting him whenever I could safely get away. The therapy sessions actually gave me perfect alibis since they were scheduled appointments Garrett knew about. I'd leave early or stay late, telling him I needed time to process what we discussed, when really I was with the man who actually understood me. The whole time I was mentally preparing for my exit strategy. I started researching apartments, figuring out finances, and most importantly, convincing myself that leaving wouldn't really hurt the kids that much. After all, they'd still have Garrett, and honestly, He'd probably be a better parent without me there distracting him from his responsibilities anyway. The day I finally left, I felt this incredible rush of freedom that I hadn't experienced since before I got married. I'd spent weeks preparing, finding an apartment near Damon's place, and slowly moving my most important belongings out when Garrett was at work. The kids were at school when I packed the last of my things, which made it easier because I didn't have to deal with their drama and emotional manipulation right then. When Garrett came home that evening and found my note explaining that I was choosing to prioritize my happiness for once in my life. I was already settled into my new place with Damon, finally free to be the woman I was meant to be. I'd written that I needed space to figure out who I was outside of being just a wife and mother, that maybe someday we could work things out. But honestly, I was just trying to keep my options open. The kids called crying that first night, begging me to come home. But I had to stay strong. They were young and couldn't understand that sometimes adults need to make difficult choices for their own well-being. I explained that mommy needed to be happy to be a good mommy and that I'd see them soon once everyone adjusted to the new situation. It wasn't like I was abandoning them, I just needed some time to focus on myself and my relationship with Damon. Garrett started calling constantly, leaving these pathetic voicemails asking me to reconsider and think about the children. But where was all this emotion and desperation when I was drowning in our dead marriage? Now that I was gone, suddenly he wanted to fight for me. It was too late for grand gestures and promises to change. I'd already found something real with Damon, something Garrett had never been capable of giving me. Living with Damon felt like finally coming home. We'd stay up all night talking, something Garrett and I hadn't done in years. He'd bring me flowers just because, cook dinner for me after long days, and actually want to hear about my thoughts and feelings. This was what a real relationship looked like. Two people who genuinely enjoyed each other's company and prioritized their connection above everything else. When the divorce papers came, I was shocked by how cold and businesslike they were. Garrett was asking for full custody and basically offering me nothing in terms of assets or support. He was clearly trying to punish me for choosing my own happiness. But I wasn't going to let his vindictive behavior drag me down. I signed everything quickly because honestly, I was ready to start fresh without all the baggage from my old life weighing me down. The custody arrangement worked out perfectly for everyone involved. The kids would stay with Garrett during the week since he'd always been more of the disciplinarian anyway, and I'd see them on weekends when I felt ready for that responsibility. Again, it gave me time to build my new life with Damon while still being available to the children when they needed their mother. Everyone was getting what they needed. Garrett got to play the martyr single dad, the kids got stability, and I got freedom. My parents were disappointed, of course, but they didn't understand what it was like being married to someone who treated you like hired help for over a decade. They kept pushing me to think about the children, but I was thinking about them. They deserved a mother who was fulfilled and happy, not bitter and resentful because she'd sacrificed everything for people who took her for granted. 3 months after the divorce was finalized, Damon sat me down and delivered news that completely blindsided me. Apparently, he'd been having second thoughts about our future together and felt like maybe we'd moved too fast. He'd met someone else, someone without the complications of 5 kids and an ex-husband, and thought it would be better if we took a break to figure things out. A break. After I'd given up everything for him, I was devastated, but more than that, I was furious. How could he do this to me after everything I'd sacrificed? I'd left my entire life behind for him, lost my children, my home, my stability. Now he was just walking away like none of it mattered? The betrayal felt even worse than anything Garrett had ever done because at least Garrett had been honest about not caring. Damon had made me believe I was special, that what we had was worth everything I'd given up, but instead of falling apart completely, I decided to prove that I could make it on my own. If Damon thought I was just going to crawl back to my old life with my tail between my legs, he was wrong. I found my own apartment, got a different job, and started rebuilding from scratch. It was hard, definitely harder than I'd expected, but I refused to let anyone say I couldn't survive without a man taking care of me. The kids would call sometimes, usually when they were upset about something at school or fighting with Garrett, and those conversations were honestly exhausting. They'd want me to come back and fix everything, not understanding that their father was perfectly capable of handling their problems. I'd try to give advice over the phone, but they seemed to think that because I was their mother, I should drop everything and rush back whenever they needed something. Dating after Damon was a nightmare. Men my age were either divorced with their own baggage or had never been married and weren't interested in someone with 5 kids, even if those kids primarily lived with their father. The few relationships I managed to start always fell apart when guys realized how complicated my family situation was. Apparently, most people couldn't understand why a mother would choose to live separately from her children, no matter how I explained it. Financially, things got tight fast. The apartment was expensive, and without Garrett's income to rely on, I had to take whatever work I could find. The child support I was supposed to pay was a joke considering what little I was making, but Garrett kept harassing me about it like I was deliberately trying to hurt the kids. He could afford to take care of them just fine without my contribution, but he wanted to make me feel guilty for not being able to contribute more. After a couple of years of struggling on my own, I met Craig at a bar downtown. He wasn't the most stable guy, had some issues with drinking and couldn't keep steady work, but he was charming and made me laugh when I needed it most. When he suggested we move in together to split expenses, it seemed like a practical solution. I wasn't looking for another grand love affair. I just wanted someone who appreciated my company and could help make life a little easier. Craig and I lasted about 5 years before his drinking got completely out of control and I had to choose between enabling his addiction or saving myself. By then, I'd barely spoken to the kids in months because every conversation turned into them guilt-tripping me about missing their events or not being around enough. Garrett had remarried some woman who apparently attended every soccer game and school play, making me look even worse by comparison, though I'm sure that was intentional on his part. Fast forward to now. I'm 54, recently divorced again after Craig's drinking led to financial disaster and bankruptcy. And I've been doing a lot of thinking about my life. The kids are all adults now, with their own lives, and honestly, watching their social media posts makes me realize how much I've missed. Not that anyone bothered to keep me updated about graduations, relationships, or career achievements, but apparently I'm supposed to psychically know when important things happen in their lives. A few months ago, I started feeling nostalgic around what would have been my and Garrett's anniversary. I found myself wondering if he ever thought about the good times we had before everything fell apart. So I sent him a message on Facebook just saying happy anniversary, thinking maybe after all these years we could at least be friendly. He didn't even respond, which honestly hurt more than I expected it to. Then I started sending him some of those memes about parenting daughters, since we had 3 girls together, just trying to reconnect on some level. I mean, we share 5 children. You'd think there would be some common ground there, but again, nothing. Complete radio silence, like I don't even exist. It's like he's determined to pretend our entire history together never happened, which is pretty immature if you ask me. I've tried reaching out to the kids too, but those conversations never go well. They act like I'm some stranger who has no right to be interested in their lives when I'm literally their mother. Yes, I made some choices they didn't understand when they were young, but they're adults now. You think they could see past their childhood hurt and appreciate that. I was just trying to find happiness after years of being miserable. Last week, I finally got Garrett's phone number from my mom and texted him asking for copies of our old family photos and wedding pictures. I don't have any of those memories anymore after all the moves and chaos of the past 25 years. And I thought maybe he'd understand that those pictures mean something to me too. But apparently, even that simple request is too much to ask because, once again, no response. The thing that really gets me is how everyone acts like I'm the villain in this story. Like I'm supposed to feel guilty forever for choosing my own happiness over staying in a marriage. Garrett moved on, remarried, and from what I can see on social media, he seems perfectly content with his new life. The kids have grown up and started their own families. Everyone got what they wanted in the end, so why can't they just let the past be the past? I'm not asking for forgiveness or to turn back time. I'm just trying to figure out why a simple conversation or acknowledgement of our shared history is so impossible. We're all adults here, and we have 5 children together who have given Garrett grandchildren that I've never even met. You'd think there would be some maturity and willingness to at least be civil after all these years, but apparently holding grudges is more important than moving forward like grown-ups. Maybe I should have handled things differently back then, been more patient, or tried harder to work things out. But I can't change the past. All I can do is try to build some kind of relationship with my family now. But it's pretty clear that nobody's interested in giving me that chance. So I guess I'll just have to accept that some people prefer to stay bitter and resentful rather than embrace the possibility of healing and moving forward together.